In a previous video, we covered how much overall tax British Columbians pay. We showed that BC has fairly low overall tax compared to other provinces, and that Canada has fairly low overall tax compared to other rich nations. Now we'll take a closer look at who pays how much tax in BC. So why do we care about this? Well, the breakdown of who pays how much tax matters, particularly in terms of how progressive our taxes are. A progressive tax system quite simply describes one where the rich pay more tax than the poor. There are two big arguments why we want taxes to be progressive. First, as a society, we want everyone to be able to improve their lives. Seeing as poor people don't have a lot of money, there's a fear that if we tax them too much, we will interfere with their ability to get ahead. It's considered much better in the long term to give people the chance to advance their finances first and then tax them. Even if it takes a generation to see real improvements, society still comes out ahead in the end. The second reason has to do with people's overall well-being. Quite simply, $500 is just more valuable to a poor person than it is to a rich person. If a poor family were to suddenly lose $500, it would harm their overall well-being far more than if a family of millionaires were to lose the same amount. So, if we need to take $500 from someone, we cause the least harm by taking it from the richest. The overarching point of these two arguments is that taxes should reflect people's ability to pay them. In this video, we're going to look at three major categories of tax. Income tax, the tax on what you earn; property tax, the tax on what you own; and consumption taxes, the tax on what you spend. So here's how BC stacks up to the other provinces. As you can see, this chart shows the taxes paid by three types of families: those earning $90,000 a year, those earning $60,000, and those earning $30,000. So keep in mind, these are meant to describe four-person families. So the families trying to get by on $30,000 a year are likely not having the easiest time. You can see that Canada has a clearly progressive tax system. Rich families pay considerably more than the poor. But for this video, I'd like to focus on the lower income group in BC. We can see that they pay about $3,000 in total tax a year. So as a bit of an exercise, let's keep an eye out on where those $3,000 come from. Okay, let's break down these numbers starting with the really big taxes. First up is federal income tax. First thing to notice is that it's the same for all the provinces, naturally. The second thing is that it's highly progressive. The high-income families are paying $7,700 a year, the middle-income families are paying $3,700, and the lower-income families are paying only about $100. Let's look at provincial income taxes next. Again, we see a progressive tax structure, and on the whole, BC looks to have fairly low taxes compared to other provinces, but I'll point out a bit later how that can be a bit deceiving. Anyway, BC's income tax is less than half the federal income tax, and the low income group pays nothing. So we can see by these two charts that income taxes are highly progressive, so much so that the lower income families barely pay any of it. But we have one level of government in Canada that is not allowed to tax income, and that's municipalities. Municipalities are stuck collecting most of their revenues through property taxes, so let's see what they look like. As you can see here, these are not very progressive. Yes, the richest still pay more, but not by a lot. You can see here that the lower income families in BC pay about $2,000 a year in property taxes. Remember, they pay $3,000 a year in total tax, so this represents 2/3 of the tax they pay. Now, let's turn to the third tax category, consumption taxes. First, let's look at provincial sales tax. Clearly, these are more progressive than property taxes, but less so than income taxes. If we look at BC's lowest income group again, we see that they pay $700 a year in provincial sales tax. This means that property taxes and sales taxes combined make up about 90% of the total tax paid by BC's lower income families. The carbon tax is another consumption tax, and it's fun to look at. Of course, BC is the only province to have one, but it's also interesting to note, again, the progressivity. We've seen that on the whole, consumption taxes aren't very progressive, but they can be. In this case, the lower income families get a rebate. The designers of this tax apparently wanted to make sure that they did not increase the tax burden on those least able to handle it. Okay, one more issue, health premiums. Remember back when I said that BC's low provincial income tax may be deceiving? Well, here's why. In BC, we have decided, for whatever reason, to charge a health care service fee. For most people, it's about $1,600 a year. But not every province does this. Alberta and Saskatchewan, for instance, don't charge this fee. They get their revenues predominantly from income taxes. So let's look at those again. You see, it looks like BC's income taxes are lower than those of Alberta and Saskatchewan, except that British Columbians have this whole other tax to pay. If we were to add on the $1,600 fee, the tax in BC would actually be higher than that of both Alberta and Saskatchewan. So as British Columbians, we have something else to keep track of here. Whenever the topic of taxes come up in this province, we have to remember to ask what's happening with fees, which really are just taxes by a different name. So let's sum up what we've seen here. Income taxes are the most progressive taxes we have. They ensure that the tax people pay reflects their ability to pay. Property taxes, however, are the least progressive. They account for the vast majority of the tax burden on lower income families. There are a few things to take away from this. First, when your city council tells you that they can't raise any more taxes, they may have a point, if only because the taxes they can raise hit lower income families hardest. Secondly, this shows that there can be a big problem whenever senior governments demand that municipalities start providing new kinds of public service. There was a lot of this happening in Canada during the financial restructuring that began in the mid-1990s. But unless senior governments pitch in extra money to help cities pay for this, it means that either we have to make big cuts to those services or we have to pay for them through property taxes, which is to say, we expect a lot of lower income families to cover the cost. Lastly, municipal leaders in Canada have argued for a long time that they need new taxation powers so that they don't have to rely so heavily on property taxes. Looking at these numbers, I think it's easy to understand why they might make that case. So that wraps up this walkthrough, and I hope you enjoyed it. As always, if you want to poke around this chart and find even more details, please visit the website. And while you're there, why not subscribe through email, Twitter, or Facebook? Until next time, I am Peter Severinson, and this is BC FactBase.